When I say that feminism has brought decay and decadence to Western societies, I'm not saying anything you don't know already. Whether it be stagnant wages, the destruction of masculinity, or the precipitous decline in birth rates, feminism has had a crippling, deleterious effect on the world, especially in the United States. For all the advantages the ideology has granted women when they are in their prime years, feminism tends to chew them up and spit them out when those same women reach the wall. In the next few decades, the United States is going to witness this event en masse. A large portion of the women affected by feminism in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the Gen X and Boomer women, I don't think they experienced feminism in its most potent form like the latest generations have. The millennial women and those coming after will be the most affected by feminism in its history. It will lead to an overwhelming majority of those women to be over 40, single, working, and childless. I call this group of women the female zombie horde. 46 countries around the world have shrinking populations, and this number is set to rise to 67 by 2040. Some 60 years after the invention of the contraceptive pill, women are voting, powerfully but silently, with their wombs. Peter Drucker wrote that impact of the technological innovations often doesn't appear until decades after their invention. This is certainly true of the pill. A long, heart-wrenching article in the New York Times titled "The End of Babies" asks whether late capitalism has killed our reproductive instincts. I'd argue instead that the revolution of women's rapid rise of demands more adaptation from countries, companies, and men if we want the human race to continue. Women are innately solipsistic, so it's no surprise that this female who wrote this article refuses to place the onus on women for the precipitous drop in reproduction over the past 60 years. But why would I expect anything different when the default position for women is to put themselves first in context of the tribe or society? This author ends the paragraph with a threat that the human race won't continue if women's demands are not met. Isn't this how modern women get their way? They don't work for it or negotiate or offer something in return like men do. Women instead threaten. They threaten men with power of the state if they aren't satisfied, or they threaten men by withholding sex if men don't comply. The past half century has seen women flood into education and labor forces around the globe. Women now represent more than 60% of global university graduates from Brazil and Iceland to the United Arab Emirates. Government and corporate policies have struggled to keep pace with the revolution that women and the men they marry, birth, or work with have wrought on all of our lives. A generation ago, in countries and companies where conciliating work and family was difficult, women opted to prioritize family. Now they prioritize work and financial independence, freedom, and marital choice. This is true. Women are outnumbering men in universities in all Western countries. However, it won't produce the desired result that blue-pilled people believe it will. The vast majority of the young, naive females who line the halls of university buildings and fill the desks in classrooms are bereft of the necessary attitude, motivation, and intelligence to excel in the careers which they are pursuing. All they are doing is wasting society's resources and wasting their time in their most fertile years. This is a recipe for disaster. Women are not using their prime fertile years to get married and have children. Instead, they are riding the carousel and quote-unquote finding themselves. I want to transition to a different article, wherein the female author speaks on women's impacts on the economy in the future. Nearly half of the working-age women will be single in 2030. A new Morgan Stanley study predicts a demographic that will drive increased sales for companies in the athletic wear, cosmetics, and clothing sector. The investment bank's Rise of the She Economy report says 45% of working-age women between 25 and 44 in the U.S. will be single women in 10 years. The growth of the single women population will outpace overall population growth at the rate of 1.2% versus 0.8% and grow to 77.5 million, compared with the 0.8% growth rate for the overall U.S. population. Now, considering the 18 to 29 age demographic makes up only 8.9% of the adult married population, and 49.9% of the women in that demographic are unmarried, America is going to have a huge problem on their hands in the near future. Just think of that. This article said that in 10 years, about half of all working women in the 25 to 44 demographic will be single. You think women are unhappy now? Morgan Stanley analysts found that single women outspend the average household in categories including apparel and footwear, personal care, food away from home, and luxury and electric vehicles. Looking at where specifically single women spend their more money, researchers found that they spend about 1.5 more hours each week exercising, meaning they are buying more athletic goods and replacing them more often. According to Unmarried Equality, married women tend to be more responsible with finances, especially when they have children. Single women, conversely, are far more reckless with their money. Since women are innately solipsistic, they usually spend money on items that enhance their beauty and fertility. Just an aside, environmentalists, if you're listening, if you want less consumption and waste, promote marriage and condemn these women who remain single and working. The proportion of single women in the workforce is likely to grow as more women acquire bachelor degrees, marry later, and wait until they are older to have children. About 80% of single women between the ages of 25 and 54 are working or seeking employment. According to Unmarried Equality, unmarried people are far more likely to be uninsured. Couple that stat with this one. Unmarried women are 4 times more likely to have Medicaid. You think insurance premiums are high now? The currently high health insurance premiums have been and still are a big political talking point in the United States. The left blamed capitalism, the right blames the obese epidemic and state intervention. What about the swaths of single women on Medicaid or those who are uninsured? These women create an overload on the system. But unfortunately, in America, no one talks about women's bad choices. Let's look at the voting patterns. If voting patterns are any indication, unmarried Americans generally see the Democratic Party as more attuned to their concerns than the Republicans. The preferential identification with progressive ideologies and the Democratic Party is especially characteristic of unmarried women. For example, in 2016, Clinton prevailed over Trump by 31 percentage points among unmarried women, 63% for Clinton, 32% for Trump. Among unmarried men, Clinton won just by 2 points, 46% to 44%. Married people also have preferences, but they are generally in the reverse of unmarried people's, especially or sometimes only for men. For example, married men overwhelmingly voted for Trump, 57 to 38. Married women favored Clinton by just 2%, 49 to 47, compared to the 31-point differential for unmarried women. Okay, so why do unmarried women vote left? A new study suggests another way of understanding the party preferences of unmarried Americans compared to married Americans, though the research focused only on women. What matters is whether women see what happens to them in their own lives as linked to what happens to women more generally. They call this gender-linked fate. Unmarried women do typically think of themselves this way. They think that if women in general are doing well in the country, then they will probably do well themselves, and if women generally are not doing well, they probably will not do well either. Married women are much less likely to think that way. They don't think that how well they do personally has all that much to do with how women are doing in general. Importantly, whether a woman sees her own fate as linked to the fate of other women is tied to party and ideological preferences. Women who see their own fate as tied to the fate of other women identify more as Democrats and liberals than women who do not see it that way. Women, like I said, are solipsistic. They will vote for their own interests rather than the interests of the country. Also, women are the weaker sex, so their evolutionary dictate makes them seek comfort, safety, and predictability. Therefore, unmarried women who are missing the masculine element that provides all of that will be more likely to vote for the party of socialism, the party that offers more free benefits. Single working women are a plague on any society. They are leeches on the economy. They have been told their entire lives that they can compete and succeed in this highly competitive economy as any other man. But we know this is not true. And these women also know it subconsciously. That is why they will continue to demand more legislation that will balance the playing field in politics and the workspace. The more women invade men's spaces, the less competitive and more egalitarian it becomes. American workplaces have become kindergarten classrooms to accommodate women's fragile sensibilities with more time-wasting parties and squabbles over the temperature of the air conditioning, etc. Women are given special privileges by male bosses who simp to their every need, allowing them to leave suddenly when they have a sick kid or when they are experiencing symptoms from menstruation. Some workplaces even have daycares so single moms can bring their bastard children to work with them. Politicians and political pundits love to speak on the economic problems of the lower class. They blame corporations, lack of government benefits, a low minimum wage, or even capitalism itself. However, no one addresses the deleterious effect that women in the workforce have on the economy. Since the 1970s, when women entered the job market in droves, America has seen higher taxes, stagnant wages, and skyrocketing insurance premiums. Not to mention, women are far less efficient than men, since men are less likely to gossip, more likely to work longer hours, and more likely to show up to work despite how they are feeling. Forget a minimum wage hike. Fire all women from their jobs, and America will see an economic renaissance that the world has never seen before. Women are even ruining football. Look how soft our society has become just when it comes to sports. Every NFL game is rife with feminine political causes and highly produced sentimental segments about difficult and overcoming life obstacles that some players had to overcome. Moreover, the targeting and personal fouls, with which the league has seen more of lately, has increased significantly. I believe this is an aesthetic thing, since women have been watching more football than ever. They want to feel positive emotion while they watch the game. If this keeps going the way it is, the NFL will have teams in pink uniforms playing touch football instead of tackle. This leads me to my main point of the video. What happens when these hordes of unmarried career women reach their 40s, 50s, and 60s? When they can no longer garner the financial, emotional support from beta orbiters, and when they can no longer get any guy that they want or distract themselves from their pitiful lives by partying every weekend. These old maids will be a zombie horde. These leeches will be feeding on the remaining wealth of our society. They will become mentally imbalanced since they won't have any validation or community from a husband or children. The cat food industry will have their biggest boom they've ever seen. And where will these women turn to when they are no longer able to support themselves because of their SMV is non-existent and they have accrued massive debt? The state. The unmarried zombie hordes will band together and demand assistance from the government. The beta males will comply, as they have been since the amendment for the women's right to vote was passed 100 years ago. News legislation and bureaucracies will be created for these old women in the form of state financial support for them. It will eventually lead us to socialism. The zombie horde is coming. When this millennial generation of women who are single and unmarried, probably won't have kids, when they reach a certain age, this will be a bleak affair. Many Americans are afraid of our government becoming more authoritarian or socialist in the near future, and they blame politicians, Antifa, millennials, etc. But no one suspects a single female zombie horde who will usher in an imperious, despotic future.